shots fired today in the Arabian Sea. A U.S. Navy fighter jet took out an attack drone aggressively approaching an American aircraft carrier, all according to a statement from U.S. Central Command.
What if the next time a U.S. aircraft carrier sails into the Pacific, it doesn't bring just fighter jets, but an invisible army of robotic hunters? An air wing where more than half the aircraft have no pilots, no fear, no hesitation, no families waiting back home. And this isn't some distant future concept. It's already being built. Behind closed hangar doors, America is preparing a carrier-based drone force designed for one purpose: to break through China's missile shield and change the balance of power in the Pacific. And Beijing knows it. A quiet reveal that shook the defense world. The 2026 Singapore Air Show looked normal at first. New jets, big contracts, handshakes between generals and defense executives. But then, something unusual happened. Instead of unveiling another upgraded fighter, U.S. defense firms revealed progress on a project the Navy had barely spoken about publicly: a carrier-based collaborative combat aircraft program. In simple terms, an unmanned strike force designed to fly alongside F-35s and Super Hornets from U.S. carriers. 5 major defense giants are now competing to build it: General Atomics, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Anduril, Lockheed Martin, building the Common Control System. This isn't just another drone project, this is a restructuring of naval aviation itself. The goal? Transform carrier air wings from fully manned formations into a hybrid force where unmanned systems could make up 50 to 60% of deployed aircraft. And the timeline isn't decades away. It's moving fast. Why the Navy needs a drone army. To understand why this matters, you have to understand the threat. China has spent the last 20 years building what analysts call an anti-access/area denial bubble. A defensive network of long-range radars, missile batteries, submarines, and most importantly, anti-ship ballistic missiles. Missiles like the DF-21D and DF-26 are specifically designed to strike moving aircraft carriers from over 1,000 miles away. The message from Beijing has been clear: stay away. For years, that forced U.S. carriers to operate farther from the Chinese mainland. But drones change that equation. Instead of pushing the carrier closer to danger, the Navy can now push the drones forward. The carrier stays outside missile range. The drones go in first. They scout. They jam radar. They launch missiles. They act as decoys. They absorb incoming fire. And if they're shot down, no American pilot is lost. That changes the strategic math completely. The new generation of naval drones. One of the most talked about concepts involves adapting high-speed collaborative combat aircraft for carrier operations. But here's the problem. Operating from land is easy compared to a carrier deck. A carrier drone must launch via catapult, survive violent arrested landings, withstand saltwater corrosion, fit inside tight hangar spaces, fold wings for storage, operate in rough sea conditions. This means the Navy's drone designs won't just be modified Air Force systems. They'll be purpose-built for life at sea. And some companies are taking radically different approaches. General Atomics, for example, has pushed a modular drone architecture concept, a kind of plug-and-play combat aircraft. Different engines for range or speed, different wing shapes for stealth or endurance, different internal payload bays depending on mission. Imagine a Lego-style system for aerial warfare. Need long-range strike? Configure it that way. Need electronic warfare? Swap the module. Need air-to-air missile capacity? Change the internal loadout. This modular approach reduces cost and speeds development. Instead of waiting 20 years like the F-35 program did, companies are aiming for prototype flights in just a few years. Some early development cycles have reportedly moved from concept to flight in under 2 years. That kind of speed is unprecedented in naval aviation, and it signals urgency, the cold math of modern warfare. Now let's talk numbers. An F-35C costs roughly $90 million per aircraft. The pilot inside represents over a decade of training. Lose the jet, you lose hardware. Lose the pilot, you lose irreplaceable experience. A combat drone? Estimates suggest $20 to $30 million per unit. No pilot risk. No political fallout from captured aircrew. No need to risk human life for the first wave of attack. If 10 drones are lost in a high-intensity fight, the mission continues. If 10 manned fighters are lost, it becomes a national crisis. That's the cold calculus driving this shift. But there's a complication. Carrier space is limited. Every drone that occupies deck space replaces a manned fighter. So each unmanned aircraft must prove its value. It must earn its spot on the deck. And that's exactly what the Navy is testing right now. Testing the drone fighter team. Over the past year, the Navy has quietly been running integration trials between manned fighters and experimental unmanned systems. These aren't publicity events. They're tactical rehearsals. Engineers and pilots are asking hard questions. How does a drone receive targeting data mid-mission? What happens if communications are jammed? Who has final firing authority, the pilot or the algorithm? How does a swarm maneuver when one unit is destroyed? These aren't theoretical debates anymore. They're being tested in real-world simulations. One key concept is something called loyal wingman behavior. Picture an F-35C flying toward contested airspace. Behind it, slightly lower and to the side, 2 or 3 unmanned aircraft maintain position. The pilot doesn't manually fly them. Instead, he or she assigns high-level commands. Scout ahead. Jam that radar sector. Engage target Bravo. The drones handle the execution. They communicate with each other, distribute tasks, and adapt to threats in real time. If one drone is targeted by enemy radar, it can break formation and draw fire, protecting the manned aircraft behind it. In older air wars, protecting pilots required escort fighters. Now, it could require software. And that's a massive shift, extending the carrier's reach. Right now, a typical carrier air wing has a combat radius of roughly 500 to 700 nautical miles, depending on refueling. That means the carrier must move relatively close to contested zones. In the Western Pacific, that proximity puts it within range of Chinese anti-ship ballistic missiles. But drones change the geometry of the battlefield. Imagine a future air wing configuration: 30 manned strike fighters, 40 to 60 combat drones. The drones launch first. They push 800 to 1,000 miles ahead of the carrier. They map air defenses. They locate mobile missile launchers. They feed targeting data back to the fleet. Then, when the manned fighters arrive, the defensive network has already been weakened. Some drones may not return, but they don't have to. They're designed for high-risk penetration missions. This is called an attrition-tolerant force. Instead of building a handful of exquisite aircraft that must survive at all costs, the Navy is building a mix. Some high-end, some expendable. That flexibility makes planning against them far more difficult. China's strategy has relied on making carrier operations too dangerous. But if the first wave is unmanned and numerous, the cost-benefit calculation changes. Missiles that cost millions of dollars might be used to destroy drones worth a fraction of that. And once those missile batteries are exposed, they become targets themselves. The psychological factor no one talks about. There's another layer to this transformation that rarely gets discussed publicly. Human pilots think about survival. They must. They train for years, and in combat, they weigh risk versus mission success. But an autonomous combat drone has no survival instinct. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't panic under missile lock warning tones. It doesn't fear flying into dense air defenses. Its programming tells it to complete the mission until destruction or recall. That persistence changes how an adversary responds. Imagine radar operators watching dozens of inbound targets. Some are manned, some are not. Some are decoys, some are electronic warfare platforms, some carry real weapons. Which do you shoot first? Which ones are the real threat? When every inbound contact could be a sensor, a jammer, or a missile carrier, decision-making becomes chaos. And chaos favors the side with numbers. Why 5 companies matter. Unlike past programs that relied on a single contractor, the Navy structured this drone effort differently. Multiple companies are building competing designs. Why? Speed, redundancy, cost control. If one prototype struggles, another can move forward. If one company misses deadlines, the Navy isn't locked in. This competition also forces innovation. Each firm is trying to offer something unique. More stealth, longer range, lower cost, faster production cycles. Traditional defense programs often take decades. This one is designed to move in phases: concept refinement, prototype testing, carrier suitability trials, limited operational deployment, full integration into carrier air wings. Initial operational capability could appear in the early 2030s. Full deployment later that decade. That may sound far away, but in defense planning terms, that's tomorrow. The hidden challenge: logistics at sea. There's one problem most people overlook: maintenance. Manned aircraft fly frequently during peacetime training cycles. Drones designed for high-risk missions may not. That creates a strange challenge. You need technicians trained and ready. You need spare parts stocked on board. You need deck crews trained in launch and recovery procedures. But you might not operate these systems daily. Keeping them mission-ready without overspending is a balancing act. Saltwater corrosion alone can destroy unprotected systems. Electronics must be hardened. Software must be constantly updated against cyber threats. And all of that has to function on a moving airfield in rough seas. Carrier aviation is already one of the most complex military operations in existence. Adding autonomous systems makes it even more intricate. But the Navy believes the payoff is worth it. Because once this system matures, the strategic balance in the Pacific shifts. And that shift could remove the very concept of a safe defensive bubble, turning carriers into drone command ships. For decades, aircraft carriers have been described as floating air bases. In the next era, they may become something else entirely: floating drone command hubs. Instead of simply launching fighters, future carriers could deploy layered swarms, reconnaissance drones at high altitude, strike drones at medium range, electronic warfare platforms operating at the edges of radar coverage, and decoy drones designed to trigger enemy defenses. The carrier itself stays farther back, safer, harder to target. Its real power moves forward in waves of autonomous systems. Think about what that means. China has invested heavily in anti-ship ballistic missiles to push carriers out beyond the first island chain. The theory was simple: deny access, control the region. But if drones extend operational reach by hundreds of miles, then the carrier no longer has to enter the missile envelope to project power. The drones do, and because they are unmanned, the political and strategic risk drops dramatically. That undermines the core assumption behind anti-access strategy: the swarm problem for defenders. Military planners use the term saturation. It refers to overwhelming a defense system with more targets than it can handle. Modern air defense batteries track dozens of objects at once, but they still have limits. Now imagine a layered attack. First wave, low-cost decoy drones designed to appear like strike aircraft on radar. Second wave, electronic warfare drones jamming communications and radar frequencies. Third wave, stealthy strike drones carrying precision-guided munitions. Behind them, manned fighters coordinating the battle from safer standoff distances. Every radar operator must decide in seconds which targets are real threats. Every missile battery commander must decide where to allocate limited interceptors. Missile stocks are not infinite. Reloading takes time. If defenders fire expensive interceptors at decoys, they weaken their own shield. If they hesitate, strike drones reach critical infrastructure. This is the swarm dilemma. It's not just about technology. It's about forcing impossible choices. And that's exactly what autonomous carrier drones are designed to do. Artificial intelligence in the cockpit. Now here's where things become even more transformative. These drones are not remote-controlled toys. They're increasingly autonomous systems powered by advanced onboard processing. They can identify targets using sensor fusion, adapt flight paths to avoid threats, share data with nearby aircraft in real time, retask mid-mission if a higher priority target appears. Human operators still remain in the loop for weapons release decisions, at least for now. But the speed of modern warfare demands automation. A missile traveling at Mach 5 gives defenders seconds to react. Humans alone can't process that fast, so algorithms assist. The more drones deployed, the more data collected. The more data collected, the smarter the network becomes. This creates a feedback loop. Every exercise improves performance. Every test refines tactics. And over time, the system becomes harder to predict. For adversaries, unpredictability is dangerous. The economic advantage. Wars are not just fought with weapons, they're fought with budgets. Building one high-end stealth fighter can cost close to $100 million. Building several combat drones for the same price changes force structure dramatically. It means more aircraft per carrier, more targets in the air, more flexibility in mission planning. And because unmanned aircraft do not require cockpit life support systems, heavy pilot protection, or ejection seats, they can be smaller and cheaper. Some concepts even explore partially expendable drones, aircraft designed for limited lifespans in high-threat environments. This doesn't mean they're disposable. It means they're strategically affordable. That affordability complicates enemy planning. If an adversary cannot exhaust your forces economically, their strategy weakens. And that's a long-term shift. China's counter-moves. Of course, no military development happens in isolation. China is developing its own unmanned systems, carrier-based drones, long-range reconnaissance UAVs, swarm technologies. electronic warfare platforms. But the race isn't just about matching hardware. It's about integration. The United States has decades of carrier aviation experience, deck handling, sortie generation, joint operations, logistics at sea. Integrating autonomous systems into that ecosystem gives it a layered advantage. Because the carrier strike group isn't just one ship, it's an entire network. Destroyers with advanced radar, cruisers coordinating missile defense, submarines operating silently below, satellites feeding overhead intelligence. When drones plug into that network, they multiply its effectiveness. It becomes less about individual aircraft and more about system-wide dominance, a new era of naval air power. For more than 70 years, the aircraft carrier has symbolized American naval strength. From the Cold War to modern conflicts, it has projected power across oceans. But this next evolution may be the most dramatic yet. Not bigger ships, not faster jets, but smarter, autonomous systems flying alongside human pilots. A blended force, flexible, persistent, willing to take risks that human crews cannot. And when fully operational, these drone-equipped carriers won't just operate in contested regions. They will redefine what contested even means. Because when your air wing can stretch beyond missile range, absorb losses, adapt in real time, and overwhelm defenses with numbers, the idea of a defensive bubble starts to collapse. And that's the strategic shift unfolding right now. The carrier deck of the future. Picture a U.S. Navy carrier in the mid-2030s. The sun hasn't risen yet. The deck lights glow across steel slick with ocean mist. Sailors move with the same precision they've practiced for decades. But something feels different. Parked beside the F-35Cs are aircraft with no cockpit glass, no pilot ladder, no canopy at all. Folded wings, sleek bodies, sensor arrays where a human would normally sit. Deck crews hook them to catapults. The launch officer signals, and instead of a human saluting from the cockpit, the drone's systems confirm readiness digitally. Steam erupts. The drone is gone in seconds. No heartbeat inside. Just mission code. This is what transformation looks like. Not dramatic explosions or cinematic dogfights, but quiet procedural change. The Navy doesn't replace carriers overnight. It evolves them. And that evolution is already underway. From fighter-centric to network-centric warfare. For decades, air combat revolved around the individual fighter jet. Speed, stealth, maneuverability, but collaborative combat aircraft flipped that focus. The power is no longer just in the jet, it's in the network. A single drone might carry advanced sensors, but no weapons. Another might carry weapons but minimal radar. A third might specialize in electronic attack. Alone, each one is limited. Together, they become something far more powerful. A distributed combat system. Instead of relying on one aircraft to survive and dominate, the mission load is spread across many nodes. If one is destroyed, others adapt. The network reshapes itself. This is resilience by design, and it's far harder to counter than a traditional strike package. Breaking the missile shield. China's anti-access strategy relies on layered defenses, over-the-horizon radar systems, long-range missile batteries, integrated air defense networks. The idea is to detect threats early, target them quickly, and strike before they get close. But collaborative drones disrupt that timing. Low observable drones can approach undetected. Electronic warfare variants can distort radar pictures. Decoy drones can appear as larger formations. Suddenly, the defender's sensor picture becomes cluttered. When sensors lie, missiles miss. And when missiles miss, confidence erodes. That erosion matters, because deterrence depends on belief. If commanders begin to doubt their ability to stop an incoming strike, the entire defensive posture weakens. And that's precisely the pressure point these drones exploit. Training for a hybrid air wing. Transitioning to a mixed manned-unmanned air wing isn't simple. Pilots must learn to command multiple aircraft at once. Instead of focusing only on their own jet, they'll manage a small formation of autonomous wingmen. That changes training dramatically. Simulators now incorporate AI-controlled drone partners. Pilots practice assigning mission roles rather than executing every maneuver themselves. It's less about stick and rudder flying, more about tactical orchestration. Meanwhile, deck crews train to handle aircraft that don't respond to visual cues. Maintenance teams learn to diagnose software faults as often as mechanical ones. Cybersecurity becomes as important as engine reliability, because if an enemy can disrupt the control network, the advantage disappears. This isn't just a new aircraft, it's a new ecosystem. The risk of escalation. There's another dimension here. Unmanned systems may lower the threshold for engagement. If a nation believes it can operate without risking pilots, it may feel more confident taking bold actions. That creates both opportunity and danger. Opportunity, because commanders can act decisively without risking human lives in the first wave. Danger, because adversaries may interpret drone operations as less escalatory, until they aren't. The presence of unmanned strike aircraft complicates crisis management. Are they scouting? Are they preparing to strike? Are they testing defenses? Ambiguity becomes a constant factor, and in tense regions like the South China Sea, ambiguity can escalate quickly. Speed is the real weapon. Perhaps the most significant change isn't the drone itself, it's development speed. Traditional fighter programs often stretch over decades. Design reviews, budget debates, testing delays, cost overruns. But modern drone development cycles are compressing dramatically. Rapid prototyping, digital engineering, software-driven upgrades. Instead of waiting years for a hardware overhaul, updates can be pushed through code. That agility matters, because the strategic environment is evolving quickly. China is expanding its fleet, deploying new missiles, building artificial islands, modernizing air defenses. The Navy cannot afford 20-year timelines anymore. It needs systems that evolve continuously, and autonomous platforms allow that. So, where does this lead? In the near term, carrier air wings will remain mostly manned, but slowly, the balance shifts. First a handful of drones, then squadrons, then entire mission packages built around autonomous aircraft. By the mid-2000s and 30s, it's entirely plausible that a carrier could launch more unmanned strike platforms than manned fighters in a single sortie cycle. And once that tipping point is reached, the nature of naval aviation changes permanently. Carriers become force multipliers for autonomous fleets. Strike ranges extend. Risk calculations shift. Defensive bubbles shrink. China's long-built strategy to keep carriers at bay faces a new reality. Because you can't deter what you can't reliably stop. And if dozens of autonomous aircraft can penetrate defenses, absorb losses, and return with data, or not return at all, then the balance of power begins to tilt. Not through a single dramatic breakthrough, but through steady, deliberate evolution. And that evolution is happening right now. From support asset to strike leader. At first, these drones will support manned fighters. They'll scout ahead. They'll jam radar. They'll carry extra missiles. But over time, their role could expand. Imagine a mission where the first wave isn't led by a pilot at all. Instead, a formation of stealth drones crosses into contested airspace first, mapping threats and identifying high-value targets. Behind them, manned fighters remain hundreds of miles back, acting as command nodes rather than frontline penetrators. The pilot becomes a battlefield manager. The drone becomes the spear. That reversal of roles is historic. For generations, human pilots were the point of contact. Soon, they may be the oversight layer. What this means for Taiwan. Much of the strategic focus centers on Taiwan. In any conflict scenario near the Taiwan Strait, speed and survivability would determine early momentum. China's strategy has relied on rapid saturation, overwhelming defenses before outside forces can respond. But if U.S. carriers can remain outside missile range and still project unmanned strike power deep into contested zones, response times shrink dramatically. Drones could strike air defense sites, hunt mobile missile launchers, destroy radar arrays, target naval staging areas, all without risking immediate pilot losses. That doesn't eliminate danger, but it increases flexibility. And flexibility is decisive in fast-moving conflicts. The production factor. There's another element that matters just as much as technology: scale. In prolonged conflicts, production capacity becomes critical. If drones can be manufactured faster and cheaper than advanced manned fighters, then force regeneration accelerates. Losses become manageable. Inventory can be replenished. New variants can be fielded mid-conflict. This is something China understands well. Its industrial base is massive. The United States is responding not just with innovation, but with modularity and manufacturing speed. By designing drones with interchangeable components and shared architectures, production lines can adapt quickly. That flexibility makes the system more sustainable over time. Cyber and electronic warfare battles. But there's a vulnerability. Drones rely on communication networks, secure data links, satellite relays, encrypted signals. If those networks are disrupted, performance drops. So while physical drones grab headlines, the invisible war in cyberspace may matter even more. Electronic warfare units will attempt to jam signals. Cyber teams will attempt to infiltrate software. Autonomous systems must be hardened against interference. Some designs even emphasize the ability to operate in degraded environments, meaning drones can continue limited missions even if connection to command is temporarily lost. That resilience will be tested in exercises long before real combat. Because if the network fails, the entire concept weakens. A carrier air wing redefined. Step back and look at the bigger picture. A future carrier air wing might look like this: fewer traditional fighters, more autonomous strike aircraft, dedicated electronic warfare drones, long-endurance reconnaissance, UAVs, autonomous refueling platforms extending mission range. Every role becomes layered. Every mission becomes networked. The carrier doesn't just launch aircraft, it deploys a system. And that system adapts in real time. The global ripple effect. This transformation won't stay confined to the Pacific. Other nations are watching closely. Allies may adopt similar systems. Rivals will accelerate their own programs. Naval doctrine worldwide will shift. Because once one major navy proves that unmanned carrier aviation works at scale, others will follow. The age of purely pilot-dominated carrier decks will gradually fade. hybrid fleets will become standard, and nations unable to adapt may find themselves strategically disadvantaged. The final strategic shift. For decades, China invested heavily in a strategy designed to deny access, build enough missiles, deploy enough sensors, push carriers far enough away. But collaborative carrier drones alter the geometry. They stretch range without moving ships. They absorb losses without sacrificing pilots. They complicate targeting. They overwhelm defenses. And most importantly, they force adversaries to rethink assumptions. In strategy, that's everything. Because once your opponent's core calculation breaks down, uncertainty sets in. And uncertainty weakens deterrence. The bottom line. The secret isn't secret anymore. A new generation of carrier-based drones is coming. Not as experimental prototypes, not as distant concepts, but as operational elements of future air wings. They won't replace pilots overnight. They won't eliminate risk entirely. But they will reshape how naval power is projected across oceans. And when fully integrated, they will make it dramatically harder for any nation to build a defensive shield strong enough to keep American carriers out. China has spent years constructing a barrier. The Navy is building a way around it, not with one breakthrough weapon, but with numbers, software, autonomy, and speed. The next time a carrier sails west, it may not look very different from today. But the aircraft rising from its deck will tell another story. A story of machines flying into contested skies first. A story of strategy rewritten quietly. And a story that signals one clear message to any rival watching. There is no safe sanctuary anymore.